The sun dipped low over the Arizona horizon as Luke Merrick rode his weary horse toward the small ranch he'd called home for the past decade. The long days of solitude had settled into his bones, and the quiet was a balm after years of wandering. But tonight, as the orange sky bled into violet, something felt different. He pulled up in front of the modest cabin, the wooden porch creaking beneath his boots as he dismounted. Dust swirled in the cooling breeze, and the faint scent of sage filled the air. Luke reached for the door, latch and paused. Inside, flickering shadows danced from the fireplace light. A woman sat by the hearth, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of night. Her eyes, sharp and cautious, lifted to meet his. She wore simple clothes, worn from travel, and carried an air of quiet strength. "I'm Tala," she said, voice steady despite the tension between them. "I want to stay." Luke's hand tightened on the doorframe. He hadn't expected company, least of all someone like her, an Apache woman, far from the reservation, seeking refuge in his lonely home. "Why here?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Tala met his gaze. "Because this land is free. Because you don't turn away those who need help." Luke studied her for a long moment, weighing the risk against the loneliness he'd come to accept. Finally, he stepped aside. "All right, Tala, you can stay for now." And in that quiet exchange, under the vast desert sky, a new chapter began for both of them. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the cabin, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. Luke was already outside, tending to the horses, when Tala quietly stepped out behind him, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She moved with purpose, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her shadow of memories. She tried to keep locked away. Luke noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to keep everything to yourself," he said, not looking up from the horses. Tala paused, then sighed. "It's not easy to tell what I carry. It's heavy." Luke finally turned, meeting her gaze with steady patience. "Try me." She hesitated, then began. "My people have lived on this land for generations, but the world around us, it's changed. The settlers, the soldiers, the greets pushed us out, piece by piece." She unwrapped the bundle slowly, revealing a worn leather pouch filled with small, hand-carved stones. "This belonged to my mother, to my family. They want to take it, to erase who we are." Luke listened, the weight of her words settling deep inside him. "Why come here?" he asked gently. "Because I heard stories," Tala said, eyes steady now, "about a man who doesn't turn away those in need. Someone who still believes in justice, even when the world forgets." Luke's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure he deserved such faith, but hearing it from her made something inside him stir a flicker of hope. Days passed, and Tala proved herself a hard worker, fiercely independent, but also kind and wise. She knew the land, the animals, and the unforgiving desert as well as Luke did. Slowly, the distance between them began to close. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the mountains, Luke found Tala sitting by the fire, her gaze lost in the flames. "You trust me," she said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. Luke nodded. "More than I ever thought I would." She smiled softly, and for the first time since she arrived, the hardness around her eyes softened. But even as they found comfort in each other's company, the past wasn't done with them. A dark shadow loomed on the horizon, one that threatened not just their fragile peace, but their very lives. The horizon was stained red by the setting sun when Luke spotted dust rising in the distance. At first, he thought it might be a herd of cattle, but the steady, purposeful cloud told a different story. "Riders," he nudged Tala, who was mending a fence post nearby. "Look, rider, coming fast." Her eyes narrowed, scanning the trail. "They're not friendly. I can feel it." Luke's hand instinctively dropped to his rifle. "We've got company." The riders came into view, 5 men, hardened and rough, with guns strapped low and faces shadowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. Their leader, a scarred man with a cold glare, rode at the front. Luke recognized him instantly. Jed Malden, the outlaw who had terrorized nearby settlements for months. Tala stepped closer, steady as a mountain. "He's looking for something, or someone." Luke's gut clenched. "You." Her lips pressed tight. "It's the ledger." He frowned. "The ledger." Tala gave him a quick rundown, a record of Malden's illegal dealings, smuggled goods, and worse. Her brother had once tried to bring it to light, and now Malden wanted to erase anyone connected to it. The men stopped just short of the ranch's gate. Guns raised. "Luke Merrick," Malden called out. "Your guest is wanted. Hand her over, and maybe I let you live." Luke squared his shoulders. "This land's mine. No one's handing over anyone." Malden laughed darkly. "Suit yourself." The first shot rang out, shattering the silence and sending birds scattering into the dusky sky. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the canyon. Luke and Tala moved as one back to back, firing, dodging, and taking cover. Dust rose around them as the battle intensified. But even as bullets flew, something else took root: a fierce trust between two souls fighting not just for survival, but for something more. When the last outlaw was driven off, Luke looked at Tala, her face streaked with dirt, eyes fierce yet unwavering. "We're in this together now," he said. She nodded, no turning back. And as the stars blinked awake overhead, a new fight began, not just for the land, but for their future. The firelight flickered softly in the quiet of the cabin, casting long shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Luke and Tala sat close, the air thick with unspoken words. Tala pulled the leather pouch from her satchel, tracing her fingers over the worn stones inside. "There's more you need to know," she said quietly. Luke leaned in. "I'm listening." She told him about the ledger's origins, how it was stolen from Malden years ago by her brother David, a man brave enough to expose corruption and greed but who paid the ultimate price. "My people have suffered for generations," Tala said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "And now Malden wants the ledger back, no matter who stands in his way." Luke swallowed hard. The fight was bigger than he'd realized. It wasn't just about survival, it was about justice. About honoring those who'd been silenced. He reached out, taking her hand gently. "We'll face it together." Tala looked up, eyes reflecting the flames. "I want to believe that." Outside, the desert was still and quiet, but both knew the calm was fragile. The past was chasing them, fast and unforgiving. And as the night deepened, Luke realized something he hadn't before. This Apache woman who'd walked into his life was no longer a stranger. She was his partner, in battle, in heart, in whatever was to come. They left before first light. Luke saddled his mare with practiced hands, the cold morning air stiff in his lungs. Tala mounted silently beside him, her rifle slung across her back, the ledger hidden beneath the folds of her saddle. Blanket. They said nothing as they rode, only the sound of hooves and the call of distant coyotes accompanied them through the high desert. Jed Malden had retreated into an old box canyon beyond Iron Creek, a place known to outlaws and drifters, where the law didn't reach, and graves were shallow. That's where they were headed now, and Luke knew, riding beside her, that this wasn't just a mission, it was a reckoning. Tala finally broke the silence. "We might not come back." Luke nodded. "That true of most things worth doing?" She glanced at him, the corner of her mouth twitching into a ghost of a smile. "You always talk like you've already lived 1,000 lives." "Feels like I have." By midday, they reached the canyon. Smoke curled lazily from behind the ridge. Malden's camp. Luke tied his horse low in the brush and motioned to Tala. They crept up the narrow slope, rifles ready. Below them, 5 men. One of them, Malden, unmistakable with his scarred jaw and red scarf. The other 4 sat lazily near the fire, weapons within reach. Tala looked at Luke. "We take the high ground. Force them out." He nodded. "I'll draw their fire. You get the ledger to safety if things go bad." But she shook her head. "We finish this together." He didn't argue. Luke fired first, a warning shot, splitting the air with thunder. Then another. Chaos erupted below, as Malden's men scrambled. Bullets tore through the camp. One outlaw fell before he even reached cover. Another ran, only to be met with Tala's aim, sharp and sure. Then Malden barked orders. Crouching behind a crate with his rifle, he fired toward the ridge, barely missing Luke. "You don't have to die for her, Merrick," Malden shouted. "She's just using you. They always do." Luke answered with a shot that clipped Malden's shoulder. "I'm not dying for anyone," he shouted back, "but I'll fight for what's right." The battle raged sharp, brutal, fast. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Malden's men were dead. The 4th had run. Malden himself bled onto the dirt, clutching his shoulder as Luke and Tala approached. "I should finish it right here," Tala said, leveling her rifle. Malden stared up at her, defiant despite the blood. "You won't." "No," Luke said gently. "She's better than that." Tala's eyes flicked to Luke, and slowly, she lowered her weapon. Luke stepped forward, cuffed Malden with the iron shackles he'd brought from town. "It's over," he said. Malden sneered, but said nothing, as they tied him to a horse and headed back toward the ranch. Tala finally exhaled. "Feels like something ended today." Luke looked at her. It did. It was late afternoon when they returned to the ranch. The wind rolled across the fields, golden grass swaying like waves under a wide, peaceful sky. The marshal had arrived just hours before, tipped off by a letter Luke had sent before they left. Malden was taken into custody. The ledger turned over to the authorities. The outlaw's fate was sealed. That night, the ranch was quiet again, not with fear, but with calm. With peace. Luke stood on the porch, looking out at the open land he'd fought so long to protect. Tala stepped beside him, her braid brushing against his shoulder in the breeze. "They'll talk about you," he said. "The woman who brought down Malden." She shrugged. "Let them talk. I didn't do it for them." Luke looked at her, his voice low. "Why did you stay, Tala?" She was quiet for a moment, then answered softly, "Because you didn't ask me to leave." Luke's lips twitched into the smallest smile. "That all it takes? It's more than most ever gave." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I've been out here alone a long time," he said. "Tried to convince myself I liked it, that it was easier. But now," Tala turned toward him. "Now," he took a breath. "Now I don't think I could go back to that kind of silence. Not after you." She didn't say anything at first. Then, "Good, because I'm not leaving." The stars broke out above them, clean and quiet, and the wind stirred the fields with a song older than either of them. They stayed like that a long while, two people shaped by scars, standing on solid ground for the first time in years. There were no fireworks, no grand gestures, just the promise of peace, of hard work, of something lasting. And that, out here on the edge of the frontier, was worth more than gold. End of the story. The Lonely Rancher and the Apache Woman.